Right, we've gone live. We've gone live. Welcome to, I can see, the 190 viewers who are already here. Good afternoon to all of you who are joining us from all over the world, I would assume, to this daily Maverick launch of Nadav Eyal's English version of the best-selling book, Revolt. I just wanted to say to you, and I spoke earlier in the green room, that I felt as if I had taken my mind or my brain out of my head and swirled it around a very nutritious soup, and it has helped me gain perspective about the world I live in right now. So I would recommend all of you do that.
Marianne.
It's a pleasure. And Nadav is one of Israel's leading journalists. He has covered the Middle East, international politics, and he's one of those rare species. Oh, here we go. To me, he's a rare species of journalist who actually has personally engaged with the world. And I thought that what I'd like to do, I wonder who's put this up here. Oh, it's wonderful. I have nothing to do with this little blurb up here, Nadav, at the moment.
Well, the guy.
There we go. I'll try next it. There we go. Well, it's staying on the sand. But what I thought I would like to do, actually, just for the viewers, because this is, this is such a dense book with such layering and such an attempt at, I think, philosophically, ideologically, and spiritually to understand the world. But let's tell people who you are. This book has been a journey to disparate places and an account of events over more than a decade. The people whose stories I have told, American workers, unemployed Greeks, Chinese entrepreneurs, Syrian refugees, walk a narrow path between hope and fear. I was a journalist who met them for a moment on their path, sometimes at a moment of disillusion, sometimes in a moment of flight. Where is Lillian now? Lillian is one of the people that whose life is documented here. 17-year-old Syrian refugee with a cleft tattoo on her neck. What's happened to Riyadh, who fled ISIS and arrived in Europe with business cards at the ready, prepared at the heartbeat to start a job as a computer programmer, if he could find one? Have the Greek anarchists preparing Molotov cocktails return to their erstwhile middle-class lives, or are they still holed up in an abandoned house somewhere, plotting another attack on the capitalist beast? So you've been there, you've been with people. This is an account from the very front line, face-to-face interactions with people across the globe. Just to introduce, or try and confine the debate, I mean, we need much more than 50 minutes to engage with what's in here. It's a monumental work of research, as I've said. And I'm going to sort of structure this by taking us into what globalization means. And we know it's not new. Shakespeare himself named the globe because Englishman Sir Francis Drake circumnavigated the world. And Shakespeare was 16 at the time. And globalization is something, as you say, that is in constant revolution. It is in the 21st century, though, it's something else. Its reach appears to be utterly limitless, and its advantages hugely seductive, very seductive, but its capacity for destruction, violence, indifference, and growing nationalism is the price we pay. Nadav, I'd like you to begin by sort of leading us through, let's say, post-war generation, the age of responsibility, how the world settles itself after the devastation of World War II, leading us up to 9/11 and how that changes everything.
Thank you so much, Marianne. So my book deals with globalization, but when I say globalization, I should say that usually we talk about the interconnectedness of the world. We talk about the Silk Road. We talk about connections between cultures and economies. And we have done so from even the dawn of time and civilization. When I talk about globalization, I talk about a political construct. And this is the political construct born out of World War II. And in a sense, it was born in a world divided between East and West, yet united around several ideas. After World War II, those leaders and voters saw a world burned down for the second time. And it wasn't only burned down. They saw the a nuclear attack on Japan. They saw the rampage of the murderous Nazis and the Holocaust, and not only against Jews, of course. And after the war, they understood that the main question and this is true both East and West, is actually a materialistic question. It's the question that we have asked since ancient Greece. What is the good life? How do we achieve the good life? And the main discussion, the main conflict between East and West was about how to retain and maintain that good life. And in the East, they talked more about equality of resources, and in the West, more about individualism and what we call liberal capitalism. But this is not the main thing. The main thing, Marianne, is about the memory. And when I say memory, I don't mean memory in the sense of history books. They saw the world almost destroying themselves. They were fearful of nationalism. That's true, East and West. They were fearful of extremism, and they were completely resolute to build a stable and responsible world. Now, if you think about the generation of our parents, or mainly our grandparents, who built that world, you can see this, whether you meet, a German who lived through his service in the Wehrmacht, or my grandfather, who was a Jew who lost his family in the Holocaust. To an extent, they were similar. They were similar in the sense that they felt that now is the time for caution and responsibility. And I am not just making an anecdotal perception about this. This is verified by their politics, by the votes. They didn't vote for extreme or nationalist parties. When in the US, you had a candidate during the 1960s who was openly talking about the conflict with the USSR. He was thrown out. I'm talking about Goldwater, of course. He was thrown out the window, basically. And if you had someone like that in the Politburo in Moscow, he was also being sidelined by his colleagues. And the meaning of that is that they understood that they needed to build a world with international institutions, with a WHO, with UNICEF, with the UN, of course, with the Security Council. They needed to have both stability for the markets, but also for people. They needed to have the IMF, so we won't have an inflationary process that would lead to, again, a Nazi Germany. This is how they thought about the world. They wanted a World Bank so they can build a road between a factory and a port and then import it abroad. Now, they were very much in conflict, and I don't want to idealize that point of time. Of course, developing nations were exploited. Many of them were, of course, in Africa. You had the Cold War. Many people died during the Cold War. It wasn't that cold to begin with. But in the end, and the best example I bring, I think, is the 1987 Montreal Conference, which dealt with the CFCs destroying the ozone layer. So in 1987, just 2 or 3 years after scientists discovered that CFCs, in hairsprays or in air conditioning are destroying our ozone layers, they just united East and West, communist and capitalist. It was before the perestroika, before the Eastern Bloc fell down, and they decided just to ban CFCs. That simple. And then they clapped. It was a modest event, and it was over. Scientists said, we have a problem with that material. Let's ban it. Let's do it. Let's unite about it. What would have happened if this will happen now? If scientists would come to us now and say, there's something in your economy that is destroying the environment, and you need to do stuff right now to save this planet. And the answer is that the age of responsibility is over. We wouldn't be able to unite. And I know this because of the way that we're treating the biodiversity crisis and, of course, the climate crisis. And because of these reasons, sorry.
No, I was just saying what is also interesting is just that the construction of countries after the war, including Britain and the NHS, that it was built on a social compact with citizens to rebuild, where the human and the citizen and the person the voter became central to the rebuilding. And the same in communist countries, which had competing ideology, with the West wanting to show it was able to be the best system for its leaders. So you're right. Sorry. So
so that age of responsibility led to our world having huge success in literacy, in child mortality, and in every factor of something that you could describe as the good life. Now, it didn't happen for everyone at once. It happened first in the West, of course, in derelict, destroyed Europe after World War II. Then it started happening in other places. Then it reached Asia. Now, in the last 2 or 3 decades, it's reaching Africa after it released itself from the grip of Western colonialism. And we're seeing for the first time, the humanity being in the best condition it was in its history. And we're also seeing, and that's the most important phenomenon of our time, more than 1 billion people living the life of extreme poverty and joining some sort of a middle class. And when historians write about this, they will say, this is the benefit of the age of responsibility. Now, I write in the book, you need to know 2 things about the age of responsibility. The first one is that it's a rarity in modern times. Modern times are times of an upheaval. You see a lot of changes, you see revolutions, people are executed by the guillotine, many things are flourishing and many things are dying. And this is true since probably the 18th century. But the war led to a slight pause with this. And we happened, at least me and you, Marianne, we were born during this pause. That's it. And you need to know that this was a rare thing. And the second thing you need to know is what you already sense. It's over. It's done with. We know that the age of responsibility has died. And we have entered what I describe in the book, an age of a blind revolt. Now, I take 9/11 as a point at the beginning of the revolt, but you can choose, 2008 and the financial crisis. You can choose something else. I just use 9/11 because in 9/11, agents of fundamentalism went to New York in order to destroy the end of history narrative that liberals have won. Capitalism has won. There is only one superpower. No. They said, don't forget about us. We have a stake in this world and we're not happy. Humanity is in its best condition ever, maybe materialistically speaking, but that's not, the end for the human experience. And we have other demands there. And it's not only about fundamentalists. The rebels are everywhere. It's about technology. It's about automation. It's about culture. It's about my son marrying, if I'm a Muslim, if I'm a Jew. It's about the way the white, strong countries sometimes exploit countries in the developing world. It's about a great many things which are really shaping our world. And my argument is that this revolt, leaderless, not coherent, is the theme of our time.
The revolt is, as you say, you've pinpointed it at 9/11, but you give many other examples in your book of the terror attack in India and the rise of Putin, as well as the father of white nationalism, which I hope some of our supporters of the former Soviet Union would just understand Putin's role in this new world order. But it's not even a world order; it's world chaos, I would say. Explain to us then, how does this age of responsibility and then the post 9/11 world begin to globally affect the financial markets and the crash of the financial markets? It's not me who said that. It is socialism for the rich and capitalism for the poor. And you find that key moment in the global sort of collapse of capitalism in a way, then almost like a cancer spreading out and leading to, as you could say, the beginning of what we see as the right-wing nationalism in Europe in particular, where othering becomes the issue and not the political system itself. But I think what I thought was quite interesting, you spoke about Marie Le Pen in France being one of the first to articulate perhaps or create a language for this growing sort of revolt across the world in terms of what it meant and how that later gets adopted by the mainstream. Perhaps take us into the financial collapse, what that means, how that leads also to these exploitation hubs where you want the movement of goods in capitalism and factories, but not the movement of people. So I've asked a lot of questions all in one. So it's Marie Le Pen's idea of what's happening to Europe.
So I think this is a good way to start because Marine Le Pen is really important. Marine Le Pen is the leader of the Front National, which changed its name, by the way, in order to rebrand itself, in a more liberal way or in a way that will lead her to power. And she's a nationalist leader. She's the daughter of Jean-Marie Le Pen, which is a known bigot, also tried for not Holocaust denial, but something of the sort. And Jean-Marie Le Pen was considered a fascist, and his daughter is trying to legitimize his party. They're not talking right now. And I met her years ago when she was running in order to be the heir to the throne. And back then, she had good relations with her father. And one of the things that the Front National and Marine Le Pen got right about the world, I'm quoting in the book, is a famous slogan of them. And they said, globalization is when immigrants come in and jobs go out. And what they got really well, I think, and she, of course, supported to an extent, according to various publications by the Russians, or at least she got some funding from a Russian bank, and there's a lot to say about that. And she was also, complimenting Vladimir Putin when we spoke and talking about him as though he is, a prime sociologist of this world, and his perceptions are genius and so forth. And the thing about the Front National and Marine Le Pen and nationalism in general is that they got the threat of globalization and they understood that the main thing that they need to destroy in order to give birth to a new world, a world of nationalism, a world with no liberal order, is first of all, destroy globalization itself. Destroy the way that the world was built after World War II. What they got, and sometimes the proponents of globalization don't get, is that the economic system of globalization, the fact that we need to be interconnected, the fact that we sometimes want our children to go abroad and study in a South African university or a British university, all of this changes our cultures. It threatens our traditions. It threatens local power structures. And in order to give birth to a new anti-liberal world, what sometimes in Turkey is referred to, for instance, as a traditionalist democracy, which is not, of course, a democracy at all, or a tribal democracy in other places, again, not a democracy at all. The way to do it is by destroying the economic system. So one of the things that nationalism did is not talk about capitalism as an asset, but talk about capitalism as what Nick Griffin, a British racist and a Holocaust denier, told me at the time. I meet all kinds of bunch of people.
Yes.
All of
most of them appear to deny the Holocaust.
Yeah, many of them do. I meet those edges not because I'm too interested in the extremes as of themselves, but because it's the extremes on both sides, both left and right, which, if you think about it, determine the center. It's the avant-garde, which I should take notice of in order to understand where the center of conversation is. And Nick Griffin told me capitalism is an operation of annihilation. This is what it does. So these people understood something which I suspect, they didn't say that to me, they took out of nationalist socialism, out of the Nazis basically, that they need to combine a resistance to the capitalist global system. And they took it both maybe from the extreme right of 1930s, but also from Seattle, from the resistance from the far left to globalization. They're saying stuff which sometimes sounds like extreme left-wing, but it doesn't have a humanistic value to it. And their point is, if we manage to destroy cooperation between countries, building blocks, European Union, if we can, annihilate every single thing, maybe even, the British Union, if we can do that, then we can create a world that won't be anti-global. It will be a different sort of globalization. It will be a globalization based not on liberalism, but on nationalism. And this is the kind of a global world that Putin is trying to build. I saw in some remarks of people towards our session today, they were saying a worldwide uprising against globalization. Isn't this a contradictory? Well, it's
Exactly.
not, because the project of nationalism and fundamentalism is a global project. It's not against globalism. It's just seeking to replace it. What is Islamic fundamentalism? Islamic fundamentalism talks about the ummah, it talks about all of us, all around the world, Muslims, as one nation. This is the meaning of the word ummah, the nation of believers, beyond borders. They just want a different side of globalization. So these are competing ideas with globalization that we're seeing, and they are struggling now.
Well, as you say, I mean, what you attempt to do throughout the book is look at what are the benefits that globalization has brought to societies, and these are there for us to see. The raising of the numbers of literacy, birth rates in some places at a certain point, greater interconnectivity. So when a globalization arrives somewhere, let's say South Africa, it arrives with connectivity. It arrives with exposure by people in those countries, depending on their governments, to a bigger worldview and a greater sense of individual liberty. And you have these, as you say, these competing, well, they're not even ideologies at this point, but and you said to me earlier on, we could talk about exploitation hubs for an hour in itself. But I think that the exploitation hubs globally are exactly where the points of revolt perhaps begin, when those countries begin to experience at first hand the absolute devastation of allowing a kind of unfettered globalization or what do we call it, colonization by capitalism. If you could speak to us a bit about those, because throughout the book you are trying to balance what does it give us, this interconnectivity globally, and what does it take away from us, and where do we find a middle way. So the exploitation hubs, I found that chapter extraordinarily devastating. If you can just give us a few examples of that.
So everybody talks about high-tech hubs, right? Everybody wants high-tech hubs. My country, Israel, is a high-tech hub. But what I'm focused at the book is not only high-tech hubs, but also exploitation hubs. Now, I didn't like to use the word exploitation. Usually people who talk about exploitation are communists. And I'm not a communist. I'm a social democrat in nature. I'm very mainstream. You can say that I'm a radical mainstreamist. This is what the book is actually about. But there is no other word to describe what was done and is done to many nations in Africa, even as we speak, other than exploitation. If you look at Colombite Tantalite, at Coltan, and the way that Congo is or is not profiting from it, while it's being used in every kind of, smartphone. If you look at history, then you see that from the dawn of capitalism, and the dawn of capitalism globally is, of course, the formation of the East India Company, the tea trade, the opium trade, and the opium wars. So from the dawn of this capitalism looks for a place that it can exploit in the metropole back home in London. In the case of the opium wars, it was about market. I'm looking for a place that I can sell stuff that might be illegal, and it was illegal in the Chinese Empire, and I will profit from their weakness by selling them drugs. And of course, the British Empire was deeply engaged in basically in drug trade. And if you have people online thinking, oh, maybe it was different standards back then, and opium was sort of it was good to have. No. everybody knew, including in the UK, including in the British Parliament, and I bring these quotes. People understood that they might go to hell because of this. They understood exactly what opium is doing, and they didn't care. It was about profit. And another example that I bring even earlier is, of course, of Haiti and the slave rebellion in Haiti, which I think is a fantastic example. The slave rebellion in Haiti during the 18th and 19th century was the most successful attempt of people of color to get their freedom. And it was, for the first time in history, a modern nation born from a slave revolt, a modern nation of people of color, of people who were black. And the way that they released themselves was after hundreds of years of being an exploitation hub for France. This was the most profitable colony for France in terms of sugar, and not only sugar. And it ended with them saying, hey, there is a French Revolution out there. They sent emissaries to Paris. And they said, we want in with this revolution. We are also free people. They were all, some of them were free. They were released from their slavery. And then the French, liberals, they said, oh, no. Liberalism and empire, they go together. They are entwined. Liberalism and empire had an unholy alliance. That was true for the Brits as it was true for the French. And they didn't allow them. And then the revolt broke out. It ended with a civil war and with the formation of Haiti. But these bounds, these financial bounds, were never lifted. You see, when the French became stronger, they returned to Haiti and they demanded compensation for all the slaves they lost, for the colony they lost. And Haiti continued to pay that compensation, billions and billions of dollars, until the 1940s of the last century, of the 20th century. This is just amazing. They were bound by financial constraints after they were taken over, of the whip. And this is an example. And you see this pattern again and again. I come, I exploit, I leave. I come, I exploit, I leave. And the good news about that I talk about in the book, is that this is not sustainable anymore. Because in Haiti, they could have done that for hundreds of years. In China, they did that for 100 years, which the Chinese themselves call 100 years of humiliation. But if you look today, you can see that right now it's dozens of years before, or several years before, the local citizenship rises up. They are literate, they have read those books, and they know their rights, and they kick out those exploiters, and they take control of their own destiny. And in that sense, these exploitation hubs now need to move across the globe more ferociously, more quickly, finding new spots, exploit in, exploit out, easy come, easy go, because they understand that the locals are not going to allow this to operate too much. And in the end, it's going to be over. They're not going to find anymore so many weak states or weak societies. And this is why I'm optimistic in the end, because I think it's changing for the better. But it's still, this is the pattern of globalization. I can't believe.
And as you say, what it also does, these exploitation hubs minimize the amount of power governments actually exercise over their own citizens. And citizens begin to see that the large corporation or global company appears to be able to have more power than governments themselves. And so this then starts to lead to this mistrust that we're seeing globally. And I want to sort of maybe lead from that. I would really recommend people read the book in order to get the extent of the devastation, the climate devastation, which is one we're going to face altogether as a result of this practice. But I think you wrote something very interesting here that I just wanted us to before we segue into, I think, the section on truth and truth telling and how that has disrupted our very sense of mental well-being in the world, you say that fundamentalism is not a natural byproduct of ignorance or poverty, but rather a radical argument addressing the loss of meaning and a sense of alienation brought on by globalization. I think it's important for people to hold that in mind and not always just try and glibly attribute it to ignorance, because in fact many of the fundamentalists are not, they're highly educated people. If we could move into chapter 19, which for me is, as a journalist also working in a country and for a publication which has Defend Truth as its logo, truth is important to us. I think what you also say at the start or somewhere in that opening paragraph is for nationalists and fundamentalists of our age to prosper politically and for the revolts to rage is not enough. It's not enough for the middle class to feel economically and culturally disenfranchised. The growing indifference to facts needs to spread fast, demoting ideas about objectivity and promoting sentiment instead of rational thought. So if we could move into how social media, and as I see you say, our generation calls it the internet, and that it's quaint for us to call it the internet. Our children don't even call it the internet anymore. It's just so much part of their lives. But if you could speak to us about the role of facts, science, truth-telling, and reason in the making of unreason in the current global situation.
So this is the way that I tackle the issue of the implosion of truth. This is the name of the chapter. Is basically by saying that everybody's talking about everyone's lying online and how many lies are being spread online. It could be by the Russians during the US elections in 2016. It can be by, huge multinational companies. And it can be by your friends sharing just fake news in their Facebook feed or in their Instagram feed. But the point is not talking about how many people are lying. People have lied throughout history, and we have research before the internet age about how many lies people tell a day. And people lie. Some of them lie less than others, but people lie constantly. And it's even when you check, the development of children, you need to see at a certain point that they know the difference between facts and not facts. One of the ways to know that is because they're bluffing. I don't want to say lying because all our children never lie, of course, but sometimes they bluff. But I think that the point is not people lying all the time. I think that the point is that people have been lied to. I think that the reason that we're having this conversation right now is because we discovered, all of us and almost at once, that we've been lied to. And the example I bring in the book is the example of my grandmother, which sends me to buy a dishwasher or washing machine. And she sends me to the same vendor, the same shop that she used to buy the last 30 years with very specific instructions of what should I buy and how should I pay him, as the age of responsibility tended to do. Everything is very set, And I go there and he tells me the price of the washing machine. And then I go online with my smartphone and I see I can buy it for 30% less online with the same warranty and everything. And I do that. I don't buy in his shop. And then I go back to my grandmother and I tell her that story. And she says, well, that means that he cheated us in all these years. And I say, no, Grandma, it means that he has a shop over there. And he's trying to make profit, and that's it. And she said, no. He cheated us. He wasn't truthful with us. He could have given us, he didn't give us a good price. He just used us. So she discovered that a local authority figure, a vendor, a shop owner, not an important one, wasn't completely truthful about his prices. What did we all discover? We discovered, for instance, that our, Ministry of Finance can go on a speech. And if it was 25 years ago, he would have said, in 1994, the GDP per capita in South Africa was this and that, this and that. And then how many people would have known that he was, for instance, lying? What would they need to do in order to discover that? They would have needed to go to, an old newspaper or an encyclopedia or something and check that out, or pick up the phone and talk with a friend in the finance ministry or do something. Today, we're sitting in front of the speech of the finance minister and we Google him online. I give lectures all the time. One of the things that I say to the people I lecture to, I am Google proofed. And if you want, I know that you're going to check what I'm saying during my lecture. So I'll give you the keywords. So you don't need to take your eyes too much off me when you do that, if you don't believe a fact. And we lived in a world that wasn't Google proofed. We lived in a world that physicians, doctors, politicians, local shop owners, journalists, by the way, I'm saying this as a journalist, they could have told us all kinds of stories, and they did. I bring a study in the book from Columbia University in New York. They took 47 people and they divided them to people with power, people without power, and they needed to cheat one another. And of course, the people who they just told them that they have power, they found it really easy to lie. And when I say really easy to lie, they check that, Marianne, by checking their saliva and their hormones. And they discovered that even if you take a bunch from the street and you just give power to some of them, they feel biologically more inclined to lie more comfortably than other people. So our power figures lied their teeth out and they felt comfortable about that, biologically speaking. And then one day, we all went online and we said, let's check what that politician said. Oh, he lied. That teacher, that lecturer that everybody admired, he sort of bended the rules a bit about telling the truth. And then people said, if that's the case, I'm not trusting anyone. And another thing happened. Do you remember, Marianne? You probably do because you're a journalist. We always had these discussions about facts. We would meet a friend and I would say, oh, no. That president lost power in 1996. And he would say, no, it was 1997. And people would actually go into fist fights about factual discussions. Have you ever seen, in the last decade, these kinds of conflicts? No, because everybody would say, oh, just a second, I'm going to, go to Wikipedia. I'll tell you in a second. And that means that people don't want to have factual discussions because they can lose them. They would rather have opinionated discussions. They resort to their opinions. The example I bring in the book is, of course, of Newt Gingrich sitting in an interview. And he's talking about soaring crime rates in the US, in American cities. And the lady from CNN is saying to him, that's not true. The facts are that crime is not soaring. And he says, I'll leave you with the theories, but I'm going to stick with what people feel. It's all about what people feel now. Now, this thing is threatening the structures of truth everywhere because people do not stick with facts. They feel that they've been betrayed. They have lost trust with institutions and authority figures. There's a deficiency of trust in the world today. And when we don't have trust, you don't have, for instance, economic growth. You need that to have transactions, to have business deals. You need trust in your society. You need this for democracy. And you have less and less trust. Now, I'm optimistic in the sense that I think that it will even out. People will understand that they cannot continue on lying. They will be more factual. But if people think that the problem is with Facebook, the problem is with this new technology that was brought into the world. No. What this new technology did is expose us for what we are. The example I bring in the book is, of course,
the hypocrisy. Yeah.
Yes, but also, I bring this example of an entire city in the U.S., Flint, Michigan, that was poisoned by lead. And these people there, they've been lied to because they were poor, because they were black, disenfranchised. And this is not a story about Facebook or Google. And these children drank water that were like toxic waste. And they've been lied to, by those authority figures. It had nothing to do with Facebook, with social networks. They've been lied to because you could lie to them. And this was the old world. And now people understand that everything is changing.
It's changing. What I wanted to bring in here, and I'm not sure how this is affected. Well, globally, media has been affected by how Google and Facebook and these ultra big tech companies have how they use data and how they have taken away, I suppose, revenues from those equity brands or those newspapers people used to go to, those journalists people used to trust, because, anyone is a journalist, anyone can publish online. So on the one hand, we have this extraordinary resource through which to hold people to account for their lies. But on the other hand, it is a vector, enormously so, of disinformation. And I think while we are in the middle of this, I think globally we're trying to come to terms with how do we regulate that. That word regulate is a word people hate and dislike. But, what responsibility do these great, big global tech corporations have, who have connected us throughout the world, also for being a vector for, first of all, empowerment, and secondly, for disempowerment through lies. So it's that tension that you try and explore the entire time in this book that makes it so vitally important. And, it's not a position you're taking. It's, here are the facts. This is what's happening.
First of all, the entire position in the book is dialectic about globalization. It has a dark side. It has a light side. I'm sorry that I can't be the kind. Do you remember those books in the 1990s, beginning of 2000? Globalization is just great. Everybody's sitting down in a circle. They sing Kumbaya. There's not going to be any poor people in the world. Everything's just going to be fantastic. So that was proven as false. And the other narrative of globalization, of course, it's all supply and demand. And that might be to an extent true, but nobody's going to fight for it. And the thing about those big tech companies that you were mentioning is that they thought that they can fly under the radar. So they had this golden age with politicians that didn't know what's a browser. And they talked about the internet. My generation, the generation younger than me, we're not starry-eyed about the internet. We don't look at Facebook and Google as NGOs. And those politicians did. Those politicians said, it's good for the economy. We want a new research and development center built here. I'm talking about, for instance, in my country, in Israel. We talk about taxation. Oh, no. Let's not tax them. Guys, this is the new world. You need to tax them. They are in for a profit. They have stocks. We want them regulated, and we want them broken down. They are not going to maintain the monopolist value that they have right now, controlling every aspect of the online world in the way that they do. Because if they will, it's a risk for our democracy, it's a risk for our economy, and these are just big problems. I suspect that the EU and the US will, in the end, make Facebook lose some of its either WhatsApp or Instagram and just cut it to pieces, because like the Bell company, you can't have such a big company around and such a powerful company. It might happen to Google too. I suspect this will happen. But we need to understand that what they did to us is expose things that are unsustainable in our liberal order, in our globalization, which have nothing to do, frankly, with them. Mm-hmm. And by exploiting them, we need to correct those wrongs in order for these companies themselves to improve. But the fact is that they profited from language of hate. Right now with vaccines, I don't know how it is in South Africa, okay? And my country is really very lucky, has been very lucky. It's not only luck, but more than 50% of the population is already vaccinated with the second dose. And we are out of it at the moment. We're out. Everything is free here, and we don't have many people in hospitals. But the enormous amount of anti-vaxxer campaign online hurt the vaccine attempt so much. And it was done through, the social networks. Where were they? I'll tell you where they were. They had policies against this, but they only implemented them in the EU and in the US because they don't care. They don't care about a small country like Israel. I don't want to say the same about South Africa because I don't know. I suspect it's the same. They won't employ so many people in order to make sure that this content is not hurting people's lives and health by spreading fake news. They don't care about the rest of the world. They're traded in the Nasdaq. They traded, in the US and in the EU. There, they will focus. we're not going to have that anymore. This is going to change for them. A lot of their revenue is coming from the rest of the world. You and I and the people watching this, we are the rest of the world. And
I want us to talk about this rest of the world. Two things. One, the phenomenon of Trump as a manifestation, perhaps, for 4 years of a particular American landscape at the moment, on the one side. Secondly, then, let's just deal with that quickly. With Trump as a phenomenon embodying globally fake news, the idea of Kellyanne Conway talking about alternative facts and the damage that Trump was able to do using social media platforms as well. And then, of course, the behind the scenes manipulation, the Cambridge Analyticas, the WikiLeaks, the Putins. So the political process is no longer trusted in countries as a result of this abuse of a resource which should empower us. I mean, this is the big concern around. Is Trump an embodiment of that kind of globalization?
So what the Americans want to believe about Trump is that he was an anomaly. He came, it was a mistake, and then we just march on. And my book comes out strongly against the way that some elites in the US look at what happened with Trump and with others. They talk about a populist wave. I'm saying it's not a wave, it's an age. Get used to it. They're saying it's a bump in the road. I'm saying, no, it's not a bump in the road. The road is changing, and it's changing because we've built an unsustainable order, both to our physical environment and to our politics and to the weakened sections of our societies. And if we're not going to fix the house is going to come down on us. What I'm saying about Trump is that he's just the weakest horseman of the apocalypse. He's just the first. He's the gate opener. He's just, the stupid guy that held the gate open for other things to follow. And we should count our blessings that this is a man who never made his homework. That when almost authoritarianism came to America, it was led by someone who thought that injecting bleach to people during the pandemic was a good remark to make in the Oval Office in the White House, in front of the press. If they had someone slightly more calculated, slightly more cunning, and someone who actually read more than, a double space, 16 font English page a day, then we might have been in a very different place right now. But the fact that we were saved by Trump being Trump doesn't mean that it's over. They want to erase the Trump era. They want to erase it as in ancient Rome, when they would have defaced the idols of the last emperor. But when you look at the data, you see that 70-80% of Republicans want him back. You see he is the front runner in 2024, and right now it seems that he's going to run. You see that people have attempted a coup in Capitol Hill in Washington. So you see that this is not the end of the road. And we need to understand that Trump, which was a prince of globalization, he was saved by globalization. Deutsche Bank, allowed his condominiums in New York to be sold. The Trump organization is global. He benefited from globalization. He benefited from Russia intervening in the elections for him. What could be more global than that? This prince of globalization attempted to destroy it, at least as a liberal project. And he's not the only one. Look, you have their fundamentalists, Jewish fundamentalists, by the way. We have Jewish fundamentalists over here. Not a nice crowd either. You have Christian fundamentalists. They are the deadliest fundamentalists around, usually. You should really watch the Christian fundamentalists. So you have those. You have charlatans. You have the kind of flat earthers, anti-vaxxers. You have demagogue politicians that simply don't care about anything beyond taking bribes and making money. I think that we know them in Israel. I guess you guys in South Africa know them too. We've got populist nationalists of every side that are not racist necessarily. They're just populist and nationalists. And also they have no real thing, no real ideology. Look at what's happening in Brazil right now with Bolsonaro. More than 300,000 people are dead. The guy is a denialist of COVID, and look at the price he's paying up there. And all of these are on the march. Now, the fact that they don't have an organizing idea doesn't mean that they're not dangerous. And what worries me is that I support the rebels. I don't think that these people that I just mentioned, this unhappy bunch, they are not the rebels. The rebels is the family I met in Marianne, Pennsylvania, the Quigleys, that lost their jobs in the mining industry. And they're not bad people, and they're not racist. And some of them voted for Obama. And they just want a future for their children. And they're not going to have a future to their children in Pennsylvania, far off the big cities of Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. And they want that future. These are the rebels. The people who are revolting right now are people who understand. They want a national identity. They want to keep some of their traditions. They want a job. They don't want to feel threatened by automation. They didn't have the chances that people in the big cities had and the universities that the big cities suggest. And they might turn their energy into that unhappy bunch of haters. But this energy of the revolt should be really channeled into creating progress. And the quote opening the book, this is the American edition, by the way. You've got the British edition, which has much better cover. This is a much better cover. I don't tell the Americans, but I usually like what the British do more than the Americans. But what the quote opening is by Frederick Douglass, and he says, "If there is no struggle, there is no progress." So those looking for a status quo, those saying, "Oh, everything is just great," and we have these books. I don't want to mention them, that everything is just fantastic. We're in the best condition ever, and let me convince you with that. And these books are selling more copies right now than in any time in history, because the elites want to convince themselves and others. But I'm saying, no, people are feeling threatened. And when they feel threatened, if they don't have a channel of progress, they will resort back to darkness. And this is what I'm trying to talk about during the entire stories that I tell from different people around the book.
What I'd like to do before we've got a little bit of time left. I don't want to not take questions, but I would like to speak for us to end just now on the notion of progress as something that needs to be constantly growing, or that means this unsustainable wealth everywhere. How do we define progress, and how do we see progress going forward? Especially if we might end up in a world that we can't live in. But Solly Moeng has asked us a question here. Is it anti-globalization or anti this kind of globalization? Given the different kinds of regimes around the world, going from liberal and others very dictatorial, led by intolerant despots, how do world citizens get to hold hands from across national borders to unite in a global call for a more caring, responsible order where social justice sits at the center? Solly, thank you so much for that question. And it's a good way for us to sort of taper off. That is a brilliant question.
So what we need to do, we know, for instance, that it is it's an incredibly unjust world in which there is a Security Council with no one from Africa. And I'm really not saying this because I'm speaking with South Africa. I'm writing this in the book specifically. This cannot be a sustainable world order in which people of color, in which entire continents, not only Africa, by the way, also Central and South America, are being just led away from the decision table. So we need that. We need a global tax regime. There is one rule of tax laws that is applicable everywhere in the world. And that rule is that if you're dirty rich, if you're rich beyond doubt, you don't pay taxes almost, personally, almost anything. This cannot be the situation in a world that is sustainable or even more just. We need to correct that. Now, we have ways, Joseph Stiglitz, which is a Nobel laureate, He wrote an entire book about it. I think it was published, Discontent in Globalization, in the 1990s. We know what we need to do. That's not the question. The question is, how do we convince people that they should elect people who will actually do it? That's the question. And I think the election of Biden is good news in that sense. But I think it's really not enough. We need to talk about progress. And I don't think that we need to defund the police, for instance. I heard these arguments in the US, but I think we should think about the police. I think we should definitely rethink policing. And I think that when I heard them saying defund the police, I was happy not about defunding the police. I told you, in a sense, I'm a conservative, liberal, socialist, Democrat socialist. But I was thinking that's great that people are rethinking. We need to think every social structure that we have, because if we were able to sit down in this lovely morning in Cape Town and in Tel Aviv and have this conversation, our lives have changed. But something didn't change, and I write this in the book. People desires, people want to have a good life, to have future for their children. These things have not changed. Everything has changed around us. And we need to keep people moored to some sort of stability. So the fact that everything is just, booming and changing and getting better and faster, that's not exactly sometimes what people need. Sometimes what they need is the sense of security. And we need to build that. And there are so many good suggestions to do that. We know that we have a biodiversity crisis. I write in the book about South Africa. I meet with Price in Nakhon City, not far from Kruger Park, and they work for ProTrack, which is an organization you probably know about. And I talk with them, and they explain to me, as so long as you have hungry people around these reserves and very rich tourists coming over to see safaris, then you'll have people breaking in. And I see how the African penguin is being force-fed.
That's a shocking vision of this poor animal being force-fed in order. You need
to force-fed. I'm at West, at the West Cape, and it's just amazing. We know how to solve these things. It's not beyond. Look at what happened in the last year. A year ago, we didn't have a vaccine. In a year time, 2.7 million people have died. A year afterwards, we have a few vaccines that work. Scientists have risen to the moment. Politicians have failed everywhere, almost everywhere. So we need to change that now, and we have brilliant ideas to do so. We just need to elect the right people, and for that to happen, we need a narrative, a new narrative.
We've got about 2 minutes left. I think what's also important, and that you call for in this book, is for those of us who benefit enormously from globalization to stop being indifferent to its absolute devastation. And as you say, people can live in little bubbles where there's echo chambers as a result of being able to sit on social media, and that desire to understand and link with each other needs to be reconnected. I just wanted to let everyone know that the book is available at the Daily Maverick shop. I highly, highly recommend it. I think if you want to understand where you are and where we could go, and you want to feel less anxious, that's the interesting thing, is that you've taken us into the most awful stories of environmental devastation as a result of globalization. You've shown us where it has helped people. And I think the time, as you say, also is for us to have ideas. We need to discuss ideas and not just the rhetoric or the attitudes that have entered political discourse. So thank you very much for a very, very important book for our times, and for being able to talk to us a bit. You've got a minute to say goodbye to us, and I hope you do visit South Africa. I'm sure there will be many, many discussions.
I just want to say, first of all, I want to thank you, Marianne, for a very, very thoughtful conversation. And I'm sorry, and I apologize to those who I haven't been able to answer the questions. I think that the future lies with complex and complicated places like Israel and Palestine and South Africa. And it is where in these places, specifically in Africa generally, but also in Asia, that we can build that future. And I'm saying this because we understand the complexities of societies that are really different and have different people within them. And this is the challenge of our time. And it's a challenge that sometimes we talk about how, troublesome or challenging it is for our societies. But I think that we should also count our blessings that we are handling it right now, and we needed to handle it long ago. And I feel very fortunate to have been visiting South Africa, and I will definitely come back. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for this afternoon. And as I say, an hour, we try to cover as much as we can. Thank you to all of you who attended this afternoon, all 328 of you who remain. We'll put this up later on and you can watch it and share it widely. Thank you very, very much for your time, everybody. It's been great. Let's go forth and revolt. Thank you very much, Nadav. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.